Creative Parenting with Nina Meehan is brought to you by Bay Area Children's Theater.
Kanika, thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to have you on the Creative Parenting Podcast.
Oh, my pleasure, Nina. I'm excited to chat with you.
So let's just jump right in. So you are a storyteller, a journalist, an entrepreneur, and a mom of 3. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey before kids and after kids, BKAK, as I believe you even put on your website?
Yes, absolutely. And I feel like it's definitely, a transformation when you become a parent of your entire being. So I was born in Bombay in India, and my parents immigrated to the States when I was just 2 years old. So I'm a first generation Indian American. And I grew up in a childhood where we were taught to embrace where we came from and our cultural roots. I would go to a Sunday school where I learned it was Hindustani or Indian classical vocal music and Indian classical dance, Kuchipudi to be specific, and it's rooted in Indian epics and dance dramas. And I started that at age 5, all thanks to my mom, who knew she wanted to preserve our culture in me and my sister. And we also grew up watching the news. That was ritual at home. So, Peter Jennings, Katie Couric, and I especially loved Oprah, Connie Chung, Lisa Ling, who were women of color who just made me feel like, oh, I could be on TV. I could be a journalist. And that's the path that I chose. And so I went to Boston University for undergrad, University of Miami for my master's program in broadcast. And that led me to move back to India. Life comes full circle, where I worked for CNN. So,
When I hear you're saying, I mean, you just have like an incredibly creative background, music and dance and journalism. My mom is a journalist, so I just really love the connection of story and journalism. You've reported all over the world. I did some research and learned that at one point you danced with Alvin Ailey. You create brand strategies for small businesses. You are a podcast host. Where do you source your own creative power? Because that's an incredible array of creative superpowers.
Oh, thank you. Thanks, Nina. I mean, I oftentimes forget I have it now, and I just, I feel like everything that I do is colored by creativity. But when you're in the trenches, you don't think about it that way. I would say, it comes to me, it ebbs and flows, and it depends on what I'm creating and what I'm building. So for the podcast, that creative source came from a problem. After I had my 3 kids, and I had my twins when they were just 9 months old, I had my third. I didn't get to take a beat at all. There was 2 C-sections, 1 year after the next. So I was kind of forced to sink or swim, and I learned to doggy paddle my way back to the surface. But I
love that.
Yeah, yes. I just started listening to podcasts, and I felt like so many of them were centered around commiserating and playing the victim, and oh my God, breastfeeding, oh my God, potty training, and I wanted to change the narrative. I didn't want to focus on those things because I don't think it helps us get anywhere. So that's where the podcast came from. And that's Total Mom Sense, is rooted in being informative, engaging, and inclusive. And the thought leaders that I bring on my show, like you, help us, understand how they're doing the parenting thing. And we understand, okay, they have a certain level of career success, but if you have a family at home, surely there are some family values in your household, and how are you living up to them and passing them on to your kids? So that's really what the show's about. With dance, I feel like choreography and the excitement to dance comes from, I I guess, a need for um, expressing myself, just the self expression. And sometimes it comes from a broken place, where it's a
Mm.
catharsis. Because a lot of the dance dramas that I used to do, and even when I performed with the Saw Dance Company at Alvanelli, a lot of the pieces were, talking about heartbreak or death or war. And, that was just like, here's my heart, I'm laying it on the stage for you, and so that came from a different place. And, um, and the storytelling and really just my kind of fervent need to have stories and journalism in my life is fed from other people. I love hearing other stories. I love hearing others' experiences because I feel like once you hear someone share an anecdote or a personal experience that has occurred in their life, you are now forever changed. And you feel like,
Mhm.
wow, that's something that I want to kind of imbibe in my own day to day.
I'm really hearing a lot of the transformational power of creativity. I mean, the idea that you started the podcast because you wanted to change the narrative, and then the idea that as a journalist that by hearing other people's stories and reporting on other people's stories, you have the power to then influence other listeners. I mean, there's something really incredible about looking at that lens of how much transformational power you are bringing to your work. So, as a mom, because you are in it with your
Oh my
3,
gosh, yes.
as a mom, how do your those creative superpowers show up? So where does your creativity intersect with your mom world?
Yeah, I think I love the podcast that we recorded where I had you in the hot seat, and I love that you said parenting is play, and you find ways to get creative and imaginative with your kids. For me, it goes back to stories. And
Mm.
my I still remember as a child, I would listen for hours to my grandmother tell stories, the epic Indian stories of Ramayana, Mahabharata. They're like our Iliad and Odyssey, and really make up the cultural fabric of where we come from. And there's this book, religious book called the Bhagavad-Gita, that's actually drawn from the Mahabharata. And so I learned those kind of like ancient stories from my grandmother. I'm sharing them through memory with my kids, and they can recite them in their own way. And it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I'm like so impressed that it's resonating, because it's how I kind of kill time on our morning commute. And it's so fun. They're like, can you tell us the story of Krishna? And I'm like, of course I can. And so I tell them this very animated story of baby Krishna. And I say that he's a lot like you guys, and I just um, kind of get into it with them, and then they remember it. And then when I ask them later, can you tell me this story, they will, in their own fun loving way. And so I feel like that's a way for me to connect with them, but also focus on the teachable moments, and it's just every fable, every kind of story that we grew up with has a moral. And so if you kind of look at each one like that and draw those parallels for your kids, they get it.
I am having a total goosebump moment over here because I also grew up listening to stories from my grandmother. My grandma Rose was a children's librarian
Oh,
and she lived in Philadelphia, but she would call us on the phone and tell us stories. And when she came to visit, like we would just attack her in the back seat of our family station wagon and be like, "Tell us a story, grandma. Tell us a story, grandma."
Yes.
And so like hearing you talk about from generation to generation, passing down of those stories, and then your children telling them back to you, that's something that I resonate with so deeply and personally. And I think that there's so much power in story. So thank you for sharing that. It's really beautiful.
Oh,
It's
sure.
really beautiful.
Thank you.
So you have this incredibly positive perspective on parenting, which I really love. I too had the challenge when what you were talking about when you were like, why am I listening to, breastfeeding is hard when I know breastfeeding is hard. I'm doing it. Like,
Right.
of course.
Yes,
Duh,
yes.
it's hard.
That's not
Like,
encouraging. Yeah.
And like I do recognize and respect that we are living in a moment when it is at least we're in a place where we can have those conversations publicly, and I think there's a lot of positive to that.
Yeah.
But I also am just so thrilled to see folks like you who are lifting up the other side of parenting of
Yeah.
like, okay, how do we keep this thing that is such a new experience for all of us? How do we have that growth mindset? How do we, as you keep talking about these teachable moments, I love that you keep bringing those up because they're so powerful. How do you maintain that positivity, and what can other parents learn from your journey to that positivity?
Thank you. Yeah. I feel like, um, having a victim mindset or feeling like, that sense of being overwhelmed or burnt out, I get it. But I feel like, you know, now what? What are we going to do next? And so that's just how I'm hardwired. I think of like just the problem solving. So that's why I'm not focusing on how tough parenting is because it's a given. But then when you think back, I mean, this is humanity, right? Like, women have been birthing babies since we were cavemen. It's not anything new. And so we don't have to
Yeah.
feel that isolated and that, just again, overwhelmed by like the child rearing process. I think you have to just think back to that. Another thing that helps kind of check me is, if you've had any fertility issues along the way. Do you remember when you were pining to have a child? Well, then go
Hmm.
back to that, and think of how badly you wanted it. So I think there's certain things you have to do to check yourself at the onset. And then in order to stay positive, especially through the daily challenges, I try to think of myself as a child. I try to think of what worked and what didn't work in my own upbringing. I'm very sensitive. I'm an empath. I mean, if you show me somebody who's crying, I'm going to be bawling. If you tell me something that's, heartbreaking, I will break down more than the person who's gone through it. That's just how I'm built. And I feel like I can see a lot of that in my children, the sensitivity that they have. And so, I feel like I try not to be as harsh with them, or I try not to be as disciplinarian because that's what I grew up with, And so
Hmm.
when you put yourself in your children's shoes, you really kind of establish this connection and equalizing force that we all are on the same page. We're all aligned. We all are decision makers in this house. And you want to give your kids that privilege and an autonomy, even if they're two, you know?
Hmm.
I think the onus is on us as adults and as parents to recognize to do that.
I could not agree more. I love the idea of we're all decision makers in this house. Can you think of an example of a time recently that you've been able to put that into practice with your kids? Because that's really challenging when they're really little. Because,
Yes.
our assumption is, oh, well, they're 3 years old, whatever. I'm going to have to make the decision for them,
Yeah.
or they aren't capable. But they're capable of a lot if you can do exactly what you just talked about, which is putting yourself in their shoes, thinking of the world from their viewpoint. So do you have any examples of how you've put that into play?
Sure, sure. So I think it's definitely important to make decisions and making choices palatable. So even if it's something as easy as what do you want to wear, do you want to wear these pants and this shirt or these pants and this shirt? So like I think that's like one thing that's just an easy fix. You don't want to give them too many options when they're having to make a choice. Same goes
Mhm.
for food. Do you want spaghetti or do you want, we have an Indian dish, dal chawal. Tell me what you want, So I think that's important. And then I also am kind of getting my kids to handle conflict resolution on their own. So there's three of them, very close in age. And let's say if two kids are fighting over a toy, I'm asking the third to be the mediator. Yeah,
Ooh,
yeah. And it's like if you were
fun.
there, yeah, if you were there, who took the toy first or who snatched or who pushed or whatever, like how did this like conflict escalate? And then now you can come up with, you know, what the punishment or what the kind of like recourse is. You
Yeah.
get the toy, you don't get the toy, or you have to like take some deep breaths and cool off, like whatever it may be. But I think involving your kids like that again gives them a sense of maturity and the fact that like okay they're giving me this responsibility that I didn't think I was old enough to have.
And is it always the same dynamic or does it rotate
Oh my
between
gosh,
them?
they fight with each
Like,
other like cats and dogs.
okay, so at
So
any given
yeah,
moment,
and
any one of
yes,
them could be the mediator.
yes,
I
exactly,
love it.
exactly. Yeah, you don't
That's
know who's like teaming up and allies for the day. So yeah, it's kind of important when you have three. And I mean, even if you were to have just two kids, like maybe you have them both share. Okay, this is what I did. This is how I felt from what happened, and then it's using I statements rather than he did this to me. I felt like sad and angry that he took the toy away from me. And then,
Mhm.
the other one could say, well, I felt annoyed that she was playing with the toy for so long, and I wanted to play with it. So you hear them out that way, and then they can kind of come to terms with it, and you can decide how to navigate from there. But hearing them out, making sure that they can arbitrate and stand up for themselves is important.
I mean, I almost feel like what you're talking about is a really journalistic approach
Yeah.
like, I mean, part of your job as a journalist is to make sure that each party representing in any given story has the opportunity to express their viewpoint, and that's what I'm hearing and how you're
Yay.
navigating that moment. I love that. That's so interesting. It's fantastic.
Thank you. It's so intuitive. I'm glad that you pointed that out. But yeah, that's absolutely it. Is there's two sides to every story, two sides to every coin, and you got to make sure that you're being objective. There's no agenda here.
Yeah. Do your kids know that you danced?
Yes, but they haven't seen me perform. I would love to do that again. I feel like that's definitely the BK before kids phase. But
Yeah, yeah.
I'll get back there. I definitely want them to see me on stage at some point. Now it's just kind of dancing around in the living room, or they'll see if I have like a recording, and they'll watch that on the TV.
See, but I bet if they're watching you dancing in the living room, that what they are seeing is their amazing mom being incredible. Right?
Oh,
I mean, just sharing that part of yourself. I mean, that's what's so interesting, right? Going back to one of the things we were talking about around that idea of perfection. We have to letting that go and saying, okay, well, this is where we're at, but like giving them a small taste of who you are, even if it's dancing in the living room. I think it's beautiful.
yes,
So
yes. Thank
if there was one thing you could tell other parents about, I'm going to use a word that you may actually push back on, and I respect that. So I'm going to say achieving balance.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I'm not even sure I like that word
Yeah.
as I say it out loud. But if there's one thing you could tell other parents about achieving balance between fueling your own soul and being a parent, what would it be?
Yes. Okay. So I will change the word to harmony.
Ooh, I like
Yes.
that way better.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Just because balance inherently means that it's this like 50-50, split. And it's never going to be that way on a given day. I feel
Yes.
like in my world, I've got my family, managing the household, the podcast, my own interests, like dance and reading, and then my community efforts and the initiatives that I'm backing and philanthropies that I'm a part of. It's a lot. And I feel like you have to compartmentalize what that is. In fact, I had a really great guest on, Samantha Edis, who wrote The Pie Life. And she said you can
Mm-hmm.
split up your life into a pie. And it's, you've got your relationships and you've got your family and kids and your community. And all these things kind of take a little part of you. And you have yourself as well. That's like paramount, the most important. But, how do you make sure that everyone is getting fed and everybody's feeling served? And on some days, you can, be like full speed ahead, laser focused on work, and last week actually was that for me. I had a lot of press that I was doing and recordings, and it was nonstop. But then on other days, like let's say if you have a child who's homesick, that's going to throw you for a loop. And now family is taking that bigger part of the pie, and if there's if you're really focusing on your own health and self-care is taking precedence, and you're making it a point to get to a certain goal weight, and the gym is happening no matter what, so I think you strike this harmony with whatever is priority to you at that time, and make sure that you don't skimp on what's important, and I think for me, it's taking care of myself and taking care of my family. Those are the most important, I guess, jobs I have in my life. And so if some
Mm-hmm.
things have to go by the wayside, I'm not going to let that get to me, because my life purpose is something far greater.
That is such a beautiful description of harmony
Mm.
and how in any given piece of music at certain times you're looking, you could have 7, 8, 9 different parts and then sometimes you have everyone in unison,
Yes.
and sometimes those harmonies are dissonant, and that's
Yes.
on purpose.
Yeah.
And sometimes those harmonies are, perfect thirds, which feels like they're blending. And I
Right.
just thank you for that word, because I
Yes.
said the word and I was like, balance isn't right.
Yeah.
I bet we're going to come up with a better one. So thank you.
Yeah, and it's one that
All
resonates
right.
with your work so beautifully as well. Oh my goodness, it's perfect for you.
So we're going to end with a 3-question speed round.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yes, let's
Okay.
do it.
If you could invent one completely crazy thing that does not currently exist and would make parenting a little bit easier, what would it be?
Parenting specifically?
I mean, go
Okay.
with what your gut says.
Okay. I mean, time traveling machine.
There it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If we could do that, yeah. And okay, a
We
more
wouldn't need
practical
we,
one, if
we
I can
wouldn't need
say.
pies anymore.
Yeah, I know. I know. No, but a more practical one would be um, some sort of AI or like robot that could do the laundry for you,
Yes.
because it's
Yes.
so
Okay.
mindless, and literally there should be something that it's like washing machine, clothes get sucked into the dryer, and then it gets sucked into this folding apparatus and it's done.
Can we also have an extra added attachment where once it folded, it automatically gets
Yeah.
swooshed into their drawers,
Yeah.
right? Because that's like it's that last step. Like,
I know. I know. I know.
Yes.
Yeah. But yeah.
All right. What is the first creative product, like music, painting, theater, whatever it is, that you can remember feeling inspired by or connected to?
Hmm. Um, I loved watching Sound of Music.
Mm.
Yeah, that was a musical and almost like running theme for my family. And yeah, it's just a piece of work that can kind of it was so evident in my childhood.
Mine as well. What is the one word or phrase you say most often when you are talking to your kids?
Ah, I mean, are you listening to me?
Yep.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Perfect. All
Yeah.
right. Where can we find you?
Sure. So you can visit my website, that's totalmomsense.com. And you can subscribe to the podcast anywhere you listen. And I'm active on Instagram, and my handle is at Kanika Chadda Gupta.
Thank you so much for being here today. Please listen to her podcast. It's phenomenal. I'm so glad we had a chance to connect.
Me too, Nina. Thank you so much.